Hello everyone, Burb here. With Gemini Cup fast approaching, I figured that today was the day that I answer the most important Trackblazer question that's on everybody's mind that will change the way that you look and play this game. You see, at the end of the Trackblazer career, you have the Twinkle Star Climax, which is a series of 3 races that give you all stats plus skill points to make sure that your UMA is good enough for whatever purpose you have built them for, whether it be parent building or for going through the CM. And at the end of the Twinkle Star Climax, you're presented with an option. The option that is taken by most people is, of course, the Go Next button because your Guts build has failed to reach the stats required. And if you're parent building, you have to make sure you do as many parent runs as possible to make your parents as best as possible for future attempts at CM UMAs. However, there is a second option that is not widely taken. And of course, this button is the Watch Concert button. You see, at the end of the Twinkle Star Climax, there is a concert, and these concerts have existed for a while. These concerts are at the end of every race, and these concerts go from Make Debut to Winning the Soul to even Miss Victoria at the end of future champions meetings. And at the end of the Trackblazer career, at the end of the Twinkle Star Climax, if you press that Watch Concert button, you are greeted with this. And after the standard musical sequence of starting with the chorus, going down into verse number 1, there is a need for a rise to chorus number 2 to show that it is bigger and better. For dramatic effect, they turn on a fully functional, larger than industrial sized fan, which I will be referring to as the Gale blower. And if they're using a prop so large and so centered and so important as this Gale blower, it begs the question. The most important question. How much blow would a Gale blower blow if a Gale blower could blow my Gale? And this has a mathematical groundwork behind it. It's completely solvable, in theory, of course. But the first question you're probably asking and wondering is, how big is it actually? And in order to get that, we would need a known length and an image that is straight on with both the known length as well as the Gale blower in view. Oh look, it is a known length in front of the Gale blower. I will be creating a new unit known as a Takezo, which is exactly 1 height's worth of a winning ticket. And yes, she is standing straight up because the next frame she is standing with both her feet exactly centered and together. So we can compare the height of winning ticket compared to the height that the fan is as well. And we looking through pixel analysis, we can see 77 to 494 pixel is the fan and winning ticket goes 165 to 713. We subtract and we find the ratio and we find that the fan appears to be 76.09% of the height of a single Takezo, which we know to be not its real height. This is known as the parallax effect. It happens in real life. The further something is away from you, the smaller that it appears to be to the observer. We look at a tree out in the distance, we know that tree to be basically hundreds of, or a story tall or 2-story talls, but it appears to be an inch or 2 if you actually were to go and hold your finger out in front of you. There's many ways to kind of figure out this parallax effect. One of them that I tried to do was there's a zoom in, which I will probably appear on screen right now. There's a zoom in that goes and shows that Ticket goes and appears larger and larger faster than the Gale blower does in the background. We found that the focal length would be about 1.25x, but then we had to figure out how far away the camera was from winning Ticket. However, we found out this. If you didn't catch it, there's a series of conveniently placed lines on the stage, and this simplifies things greatly because we don't have to do pretty much any trigonometry because we can see the parallax effect in action. The closer you are to the camera, the greater the distance between these two straight lines. Because they are known to be straight lines, we can extend this to the back of the stage where the Gale blower is. And it doesn't look like these two lines have too big of a gap between them until you actually remove the stimulus behind it. This is sort of an optical illusion that your brain does to normalize things, but realistically, at this reference point, you can see that the back of the stage has 25 pixels while the front of the stage has 93 pixels at the center point where winning Ticket is. So our parallax ratio is 26.8817%, which means that objects at the back of the stage, the Gale blower included, will appear 26.88% of their size relative to the center position, which is very important because that is the position that Ticket goes back to at the end of the song. So now this image that has winning Ticket and the Gale blower known with the relative parallax effect, we can find the actual size of things. The fan appears to be 76.09% of a Takezo. However, it also, due to its parallax effect and the distance away from the observation, it is 26.8817% of its real size, which means it is equal to 2.6345 Takezos. And if only we knew how tall Takezo actually is. Well, you see, if you go into game and under trainer notes, you can find the height of your UMA as long as they like you enough. So get your bond level up with them. And you can see that winning Ticket is 5 foot 1 inches or 157 centimeters. And now that we have a known ratio and we know the number of Takezos that the fan is, we can find that the fan is 4.14 meters, or in freedom units, 13.58 feet, which is absolutely massive. The next set of groundwork is we need to figure out how far winning Ticket is away from the fan itself. And because we have these conveniently placed straight lines, it's basically the same analysis. We go through pixel analysis, we find a known length. In this case, it is shoe size. And because we know the length of the shoe and we know the length of the distance to the fan, we can take the pixel measurements of 10 pixels for the shoe, 369 pixels for the distance to the fan following that straight line. We get 36.9 winning Ticket shoes, and using the trainer notes, we know that her shoe size is 21.5 centimeters on both of her feet, meaning that she is 7.93 meters away from the fan itself. And yes, we're not taking into account the z-axis. However, that is like very minor considering the fact we're not also considering all the aerodynamics of a stadium that is open-faced, that we're going to be losing energy from the top, but then again, we're about to gain energy because there's walls on either side in the back. So everything's going to cancel out, and honestly, the z-axis is the least important thing because it sort of acts as a wind tunnel without a roof, which is incredibly difficult to model that we're not going to get into exactly, but in the theoretical realm, it's perfectly fine. Just trust. That's the one few thing that I'll say trust me on. The last thing that we're going to need for groundwork is the length of winning Ticket's tail for a very specific reason. Using the same pixel math as before and using a curve, basically, it's technically 3D zone, but it's fairly flat in this image in particular. This is official artwork. You can cross-reference it with other artwork as well. You find Takezo's height is 885 pixels with her known height to be 157 centimeters, which means it's the ratio of 1.177 centimeters per pixel in this particular official image, which means her tail length, if you take the curve and then straighten it out and stuff, is 64 centimeters or 2.1 feet, which is actually fairly reasonable as well. The reason why this tail measurement is actually important is because we have something known as vortex-induced vibration. This is a very technical term that is kind of unnecessary, to be honest, because it's the same thing that you see when you are looking at a flag flapping in the wind. This is an example of what I mean. And yes, I tapped along to the entire beat of Blow My Gale to figure out exactly how fast those tails were flapping because the tails are flapping along to the beat itself. And I got 181 beats per minute. So taking into account human error, because you don't just write a song at 181 BPM, it's most likely a song at 180 beats per minute. We can use the Strohol number or the Strohol equation. This is technically a calculation of a constant that's used in certain physics applications for fluid dynamics, but you can rearrange it if you know the Strohol value to go and derive the actual components of it. So in this case, we are rearranging it and seeing that the velocity of air that is passing by a winning ticket is equal to the frequency at which something is flapping times the length of that object's that is flapping, all quantity divided by the Strohol number. And the Strohol number is a known constant based on the properties of the object, and it has been calculated and actually quite well studied to find that like any bushy item, such as like a flag or a tail, sits somewhere between 0.2 and 0.3. And there's been studies done exactly on animals that actually use tails for navigation purposes in flight and stuff to be around 0.2 to 0.4. And this isn't necessarily as efficient as like a hummingbird, let's say. So we'll take the original estimate of 0.2 to 0.3 and pick the center value of 0.25 for our Strohol number. So taking our 180 beats per minute, which is 3 beats per second, a beat per second is a hertz, which means we have 3 hertz. We multiply that by the 0.64, which is basically 0.64 meters, which is ticket's length of tail, divided by 0.25, which is our Strohol number, for a final velocity of 7.68 meters per second, or 17.18 miles per hour, which actually seems quite reasonable. That is quite a large gale. It's not ridiculous, but it certainly is plausible. So Takezo is experiencing 7.68 meters per second of air passing by her at 7.93 meters away. So really we reach the crux of the matter, which is how much blow can my gale blower blow? Or how much air can this fan actually move? And I'm going to be using the Delaval equation, which technically is an empirical equation, but it was made in 1930 by J.M. Delaval and Theodore Hatch and has been used in HVAC and air purification for literally 90 years. So I personally trust it, but all it is saying is the relationship between total airflow and the velocity observed at a certain distance. And we have the velocity and we have the distance, so all that we need for this equation is the fan area. And this fan area is not exactly the entirety of the circle because there's that little dead zone in the middle itself, but we have the diameters of both the total fan as perceived as well as the inner part of the fan, which is the dead zone. And we find that if we take pi r squared, which is just the circle area of a circle equation, we find that the fan itself is 13.46 meters squared, with the dead zone being 2.71 meters squared, or about 20% of its area, which is actually, funnily enough, pretty standard for most like tower fans, which is hilarious. And that gets us 10.75 meters square of actual active fan area that is able to go, and in this case, suck air into itself. In freedom units, that's 115 square feet, which is quite large. That's bigger than a 10 by 10 tent. We plug this back into the Delaval's equation as the A fan, or the area of the fan, and we find that, once we go and multiply 10 times 7.93, which is our distance squared, plus the area of the fan, we multiply all that by the velocity of 7.68, we find that this fan is able to move 4,911.74 meters cubed, or cubic meters of air per second, which is a ridiculous amount. It's possible. It's a lot. If you want to know in American terms, CFM, which is the standard unit of measurement for most American fans, which, is what the basis I know of, is 10.4 million CFM. To put it in perspective, a standard house tower fan is 800 CFM, so it's 13,000 household fans. So now that we know the volumetric flow rate and we know the area, we can calculate the actual speed at the fan blades itself. We've calculated this from 7.93 meters away, but at the actual fan itself, we can just take the ratio of the two. If you look at the units itself, you have volumetric flow rate is meters cubed over seconds, and your area is meters squared. So if you divide them, you just cancel out 2 of the meters, and you get meters per second, which is your velocity. And you find that it is 457.3 meters per second, also known as Mach 1.33. And do supersonic fans exist? Yes, we've had airplanes that go above supersonic speeds. To put this in perspective, though, a Category 5 hurricane is about half of this strength. So we have a gale blower that is able to produce winds that are twice as fast as a Category 5 hurricane. Notably, however, that is pushing and not pulling, because fans are notoriously bad at pulling air. As a sanity check, this pulling of air can be used to sort of confirm what we've had, because there's a scene that I'll show right now, which it pulls confetti from about 20 meters away as calculated. In order to do that, you have to overcome the terminal velocity, which is based on gravity. And it's basically just F of D is the force required, equal to 1/2 of rho, which is the air density, times velocity squared, times drag coefficient, which for a tumbling piece of paper, which is what confetti is roughly 1.5, let's say. And the area is the surface area of this confetti, which is like a little 1-inch cube, which is 6.25 centimeters square. If we do the same math in the equation, we find that we need 0.0002943 newtons, and it requires 0.5 meters per second, which if you use the same equation, you extend it out, it actually is surprisingly the same. It's able to overcome that at 20 meters because everything is basically a cone. So it's going to go down, how do I put it? It goes down at an order of 3, which means that it's much weaker at that point than even Ticket's doing. So the 17.93 meters and the 0.5 meters at 20 meters away is pretty close to how the confetti is acting. Let's calculate the power requirement. So power is simply the power is the 1/2 times the air density, which we have calculated to be 1.225, which is the air density of Tokyo, where they're at, times the airflow, which we calculated previously at 4911.7 meter cubes over second, times the velocity at the face of the fan, which is 456.9. This is a known equation. And you do all this math and you find you need 628.03 megawatts worth of power in order to actually power this thing. So how much is 628.03 megawatts? It's roughly half of the output of a nuclear power plant, which if there's one close by, I'm sure you could source it if you had enough power, draw, and money and political sphere. The cost of the energy itself at current Japanese rates of 27 yen per kilowatt hour, you will only need the power for a singular minute that the fan is actually on during the presentation. And you would see that the 628,037 kilowatts over about 1 minute, which is 1/60th of an hour, would produce 10,467 kilowatt hours at the rate of 27 yen, would be 282,613 yen, which at current exchange rates would be 1,823 US dollars. So it costs them 1,823 US dollars per minute that they run this fan. In freedom units, if you want to convert the power, well, horsepower is 745.7 of a actual kilowatt. So it's 642,208 horsepower to power this 18 horse show. So let's summarize. The Gale blower can blow 4,911.74 cubic meters of air per second as suction, which is important. And this means that you could replace all the air in the Tokyo Dome every 4.2 minutes, which is quite a lot of output. Its airspeed velocity is 457 meters per second, also known as Mach 1.3. We have a supersonic fan, and the power output is 628.03 megawatts, which would cost about $1,800 per minute of running this thing. So is it even theoretically possible that this could exist? Physically, you can build a fan like this. It would be really expensive to do so, as well as source the power and power capacity required to run this thing. However, we have to shift our mindset to the world of Musume a little bit. This is Director Akikawa we're talking about, someone who in lore has been said to have great personal fortune, that she goes and constantly goes and makes experiences better for her students, including the races themselves. She also has a lot of political pressure because, hey, she has one of the largest money-making things for the government itself in these horse races. It's literally what this world is completely centered around. So we'll talk about exactly the effects of that, but a couple of things we do have to iron out. First of all, there will be a massive sonic boom when this fan actually turns on. Now, it is perfectly timed with the chorus itself, and it's not large enough to actually kill anybody. However, you will know and you will feel it happening. Think of it like basically your headphones for that little brief second getting to like max volume for a bit and then being done. Now, is this bad? Yeah, but hey, it is within the realm of possibilities, and there's certain things you can do to lessen this effect that I'm sure that with the amount of money that she has, she could use to suppress it. Basically, you send a relative amount of sound going the opposite direction to try to cancel as much as possible of it itself. The second thing is can you actually acquire that amount of power? Like I said, this is Director Akikawa we are talking about, and we are talking about the number one sport in the world. This is like United States Americans talking about American football, except these stadiums are like 10 times as large. These stadiums are massive. A lot of the actual residents themselves go and watch these races. They watch these Umas go to their track. So directing power away from the city for the 1 minute required for these idol fests that everyone is really wanting to go for, these are like hundreds of thousands of people watching these things, it actually does make sense that you would be able to source this amount of power for this little brief amount of time, even if it does cause blackouts around the city for that 60 seconds. And finally, you have a massive meat grinder literally 10 meters away from your Umas. Is there an actual safety issue here? Well, there is Umas that are much closer than Ticket is in the center position, and some within a meter, within 2 meters of it. And if they get hit by that fan, that is near certain death. Now, here's the thing. The wind at that area is much, much stronger. The suction force of fans greatly gets diminished the further you go. You see, it was basically an order of 2. So 20 meters away was a half meter per second. And at 7.92 or 8 meters away that we were at, we were feeling 17 miles an hour. So you'd probably feel close to 100 miles an hour wind there. So how are these Umas not being sucked right into this fan? Well, Tachyon and Air Shakur have already answered this problem, because in the Uma Euro episode 14, which is unequal, I think it's translated to unequal experiments, Tachyon and Shakur do a bunch of things to each other in terms of science experiences. And one of those is actually a big fan. And Air Shakur puts a big fan in front of Tachyon and has her run on an unstable surface. And this fan, first of all, there is a frame that shows there is at least 835 on the final frame, which would be like, I don't know, it could be miles an hour, it could be meters per second, who knows at this point. But even then, it is able to go and push various items such as a carrot, as well as a Manhattan Cafe doll. And it's until the doll hits her that she actually flies away. However, she is able to even dodge the carrot itself, which is a 61 grand item on the low end of what carrots are. This is very different to the confetti itself. It's over 500 times the strength. So Tachyon was able to not only stand on unstable footing on a treadmill while running, she was able to dodge a carrot, which even if it was thrown, would still be influenced by the fan. So, at this point, if you're able to go and do even a fifth of this at 100 times the strength, those Umas are pretty strong. So I would say it's 100% safe and 100% possible. So is it likely to occur in the real life in terms of not within the anime sphere? No, just because of the logistics of money. However, with Director Akikawa basically removing money from the equation and having an incredible amount of political influence, it is technically, theoretically possible given those constraints. Dia no way. Hey everyone, Future Burp here. This has been a significant editing undertaking, so I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I don't normally ask for this, but please like the video if you actually like it, because I don't know if people even care about this kind of stuff. It's more fun and not even really that useful, let's be honest, but it's good to blow off steam sometimes. And it's been a question that, I posed a couple of weeks ago to people, and they said you should try this and see how it goes, because it's kind of fun to look into the realm of theory even when you don't understand every little bit about it. And I was able to look into more physics stuff that I'm not really well acquainted with. So I hope you have enjoyed. Take care, everyone. Tomorrow I will probably do some sort of CM video that will help you guys out a bit more. So we'll be back to normal content in a bit. But hey, if enough people like this, sure, I will probably do something similar with other questions, and I guess put more questions in the comments if you have other, dumb questions like this you think you can be answered by some sort of math or science. Take care, everyone. I'm going to leave you with just the concert at the end of this that I used as a source for this. Burb out.
私たちだけが切り開ける道が走れ未来の中へ新しく吹く風のように今うなり上げて到達したい未開のゴール I'll be a winner 果てない最後目